Hello, and welcome to C-Suite Secrets. I'm Heather Parsons, your host, a serial entrepreneur, fractional CFO, and a business value strategist. I've spent years juggling business and family life while helping entrepreneurs scale, optimize cash flow, and build real financial success. On our show, we bring you real conversations with founders, executives, and operators about what actually moves the needle in business. No fluff, no filler, just smart strategy, systems that actually work, and insights that you can put to use in your business right away. With that, let's dive right in. Today on C-Suite Secrets, we have Kevin Maude on the show. Kevin, welcome.
Thank you, Heather. I appreciate you having me, and thanks for look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, me too. I'm really excited about it today. So, for folks who may not be familiar with your work and what you all are doing, give us a little introduction of yourself and how you become an entrepreneur.
Yeah, so my entrepreneur journey probably started 30, 35 years ago. I started looking at how I can connect people remotely, and it's expanded into many different areas from there. Initially, we were looking at building a website that helped small businesses in rural locations attract people that came to or would come to there for visitation. At that time, I was also getting a degree in film and video. So my passion kind of led into film and video production, and had a film or a video production business for 22 years. Out of that, I learned a lot of things. One of the biggest things was, you know, finding how you can visually connect with people and be able to tell a great story, but also motivate an audience. And I also recognized that many people at that time were clicking a box saying that they created a video, but they didn't necessarily recognize the results or wanted to achieve those results. So from there, from my video production business, I had a couple other ventures along the way, and now focused on a marketing agency where we can use content like video and actually connect the results, look at the data behind it, and be able to understand how we can help shape that audience and how to activate and engage that audience.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. And I love what you're talking about there because, especially whenever I think about marketing, that return on investment is huge. So I definitely want to dive into that in our conversation. But before we get to that, I'd love to talk about entrepreneurship a little bit. Being in the game for that long and being an entrepreneur, what's kept you, day after day being an entrepreneur rather than going back to a W two?
I think the ability to control my own destiny has been one of the biggest things that has control or kept me in the game in terms of that. I found in the last couple of years, I've done some deep looking, and as I struggled with some launching new businesses and financially and everything like that, was like, well, do I go back and get a W-2 job? And I started to recognize that I liked risk, and I liked the ability to take that risk, but also have it calculated because I can control that risk. Whereas in a W-2 job, somebody else is or a lot of other people are controlling that risk. That's not to say that you don't have some influence from people along the way that in your entrepreneur journey, but you still have that ability to control the risk a lot more and make those decisions. It also gives me the freedom to set my own schedule. Yes, the business takes a lot of effort, energy, and so forth. But it also, in the last 10 years, I've really recognized that I want to spend more time and dedicate time with my kids because they're young, or they're older now, but I want to be able to have the time and energy to spend going to their tennis matches and watching them and being part of their life, and not necessarily sitting in a 9 to 5 job.
I can totally relate to that. That is almost verbatim why I stay in business. That freedom and the ability to live and die by your own sword. There's something about it once you've tasted that. I think it's really, really hard to go back. And to be an entrepreneur, you have to be a little bit of a glutton for punishment. So, has there ever been a time where you're like, okay, I've had enough, I want to go back? And how did you kind of walk forward from there?
Part of what I think kept me out of it was I was only a W-2 for a little period of time. So I don't know that I had the experience in that little period of time. Was probably 6, 8 years. And after my video production business, which I had for over 22 years, I just didn't know where to even start as a W-2. I've applied for jobs here and there and didn't get accepted or whatever. And I just was like, okay, well, now I can control my destiny and I can continue to control that destiny. So it hasn't necessarily pushed me to look for additional roles in the W-2 space. Every now and again, I'll see something and I'll definitely apply for it. But if I have a venture that's going, then I'd rather put that energy into that at that time.
I understand, and it's rewarding. I don't know if you feel this way, but it's really rewarding whenever you feel like you're working towards something that you're in more control of and not just making money for somebody else. So I
Yeah,
love that aspect of being an entrepreneur as well.
yeah, most certainly. I think that's finding, one, you can make money multiple ways as an entrepreneur. You can make money with other people, but you can also help influence other people's lives, which I think is, being able to give back to other people who might not want to take that risk, but give them the opportunity to pursue a passion in a partnership with you.
I love that because business is people helping people whether folks realize it or not. So I love that. You talked a lot about being in video production and doing that for 22 years and now you're doing more the, social first marketing. Tell me what changed in the market that kind of caused that evolution.
Part of the evolution, I think, was we built a video production business that operated at a certain level. And we operated at that level and set a lot of our workflows, a lot of our investment at that higher level. And as more and more production equipment came into the marketplace that lowered the barrier to entry, it became a lot harder to compete. And a lot of our clients that we're serving that, we might have had a $25,000 project with, we're now looking to have those projects be $3,000 to $5,000. And because of the labor cost at that time and the production equipment that we had invested in, it just wasn't feasible to continue down that path. We also had invested in a lot of clients occupied a large amount of our revenue. And when we had some changes with that client, it had an impact, and we hadn't shifted quick enough to be able to bring on additional clients.
That makes a lot of sense. I talked to somebody else in the marketing space yesterday who was also able to see that shift in the waters a little bit, especially around COVID and walking through those changes and changes that have happened in the market. The social media, the digital, the video space has changed a lot over the last 5 or 10 years. So it's
Yeah.
great that you're able to make that pivot.
Thanks. Yeah, I 100% agree with you that, small little changes ripple and they become large ones very quickly.
As we were first getting started, you talked about the results of some of these videos. So one of the things that I focus on a lot with my clients and, whether they're CFO clients or they're folks who come in through our one room program, it is around getting that return and trying to figure that out for them. Right. So I'd love to hear your insight on how you're working with clients to actually figure out their result of videos that you're producing with them.
Yeah, I mean, it's not only videos, but it's also the engagement that we're building, the community that we're building, that we tie in everything those results are achieving. So one video might achieve a small result, but in the larger project or larger engagement, it's actually contributing to a much bigger success. So the way we tend to work is that we build a strategy up front, and part of that strategy is defining what the objectives are and what the key metrics to success are. And achieving that or and then each element that contributes to that success is how we look at it. So that could be, additional revenue coming in, additional awareness of a business, or additional community. And by growing your community, that means you have an engagement thing that you can activate at certain times. So as we're looking at social, we feel it's important to have that as an element that you want to measure, but it's also about measurement. So if your community is shrinking, that's not a good thing. But if your community is growing and other people are bringing new people into that community and you're engaging that community on an ongoing basis, that's what's important to us, because I think that signifies that you have people that are engaged with you, know your brand, and are advocates for you. So that's some of the ways that we look at how, success is happening. It's not necessarily the vanity metrics of I got 12 likes on my video, or, sharing definitely is a higher metric than the likes. Comments is another high metric. But, somebody that just likes a video doesn't mean that they're going to buy from you. But somebody that is commenting on a video or sharing it or part of your community and referring other people in to watch that video is a higher metric that you're wanting to achieve, because that means they're going to buy from you and are promoting your business that way.
I love that. As you're talking, it makes me think about a lot of things. So, whenever I think about marketing and I think about community, community is something I would love for you to dive into a little bit more, because I think there's a huge difference, especially on social and in marketing, between likes and views versus actually building an audience that converts. Entrepreneurs in general need an audience that converts. So, what are some of the things that people need to focus on maybe a little bit differently in how they think about it to actually build that kind of audience rather than just being clickbait or something that's funny, but actually build people who are interested in what they do?
I think there's two different ways to look at that. One is bring a value up front. A lot of people want to jump on social media and use it as a selling platform. But if you're able to bring a value up front to your audience, you tend to have that law of reciprocity, so that the audience feels that they've been given something and they want to give something back in return. So we see that oftentimes in community. And if you continue to give to that audience, you start to see it and start to engage, or they start to see that value, and then they start giving back to you as well. The second part of that is, I think, also expressing your views so that you can start to align with the audience. So a lot of people will take just a general stance, or, the typical, yes, I like this or I like that. But if you can go into why you like it and encourage somebody to think about it, or then they can start to align their views. And I'd much rather have, 100 people that align in my views, because they're more likely to align in everything, than 1,000 people that watch my video, because 1,000 people that watch my video aren't going to buy from me in the end.
Right. That makes a lot of sense to me, because at the end of the day, especially for unless you're just an influencer, we're all in, posting on social media to, yes, add value, but at the end of the day, there's a transaction there somewhere along the way. So
Right.
that makes a lot of sense to me. And whenever I think about marketing as a whole, you know, I'd love for you to also dive in and talk a little bit about some of the things that you've seen running a business that may be impacting the margins in your business, or what you see with clients as they go through some of this.
I think one of the big things that I've learned in the last couple of years is really understanding the cost of what it costs to do business or execute on something. So in our case, we have retainers with clients, and oftentimes we have defined parameters within those retainers, but they can get over, or they can grow beyond what that is. So we estimate that, one post in social media is going to cost X amount of dollars. But when we have 5 revisions, that cost is driven up. So
Right.
understanding what that is and what that hourly rate kind of looks like, but also being willing to set those parameters so that you're not having those cost overruns and not having your margin eaten away by clients who can't make a decision. And when that happens, that's what really impacts a business, is it eats away at that margin, and then you have nothing left. So I think there's that. I think the other element is protecting your profit and being able to say, hey, we've set this as the margin, or this is the project, but this is the profit that we're going to have. And I like to, you know, operate from the standpoint, let's take the profit out first, make sure everything works from that, and work down from there. Because if you don't have profit, you can't reinvest and you can't grow your company.
Absolutely. You are speaking my language with that. Profit is something I love when folks focus on profit, but I also think it's a lagging indicator, right? So we need to protect it. It needs to be first. But there are also usually a lot of upstream signals that tell us if there's trouble coming with this profit. So, what are some of the things that you look at to make sure that you do keep your profit protected?
I think the big thing is client churn, and the impact that clients are having. If we have a client that's struggling or we're starting to not hear as much from them or not see as much engagement from them that has been reoccurring, that is, I think, a big indicator that, there's going to be churn. Um, Clients that are continually giving you feedback that's negative, that could be another indicator there. So that's going to protect, or we'll need to be paying close attention to that and trying to resolve that quicker than anything. The other thing is, understanding in our space, understanding relationships. And, we might have an account manager on a project that just doesn't work well with the client, and we need to make that change quicker than anything. Another indicator, I think, is just employee engagement. When you start to lose employees that aren't engaged, that's going to impact client results overall, and that's going to ultimately impact your margins, because one, you're either going to have lower production quality coming out of the or out of your employees, and that's going to result in upset clients, and that's going to result in them leaving.
Those are all some really good points, and I'd like to dive in a little bit on the employee engagement side of things. So, what are some of the things that kind of help you keep your finger on the pulse with employee engagement? Because I see a lot on social media and around about quiet quitting and people who are leaving to go do other things. So, how do you keep a pulse on your employees?
I think in my current role with Project Bionic, I I didn't do as good a job in this role. We had a lot of changes that happened over the last year, and we had a lot of churn in our employees. We had a lot of changes in the business, which also meant that we had to lay off some employees as well. But I think one of the big things is keeping a conversation going with the employees and being able to touch base with them regularly. And that's one of the things I don't think I did as well in the this last year with some of our employees. And so that disenfranchisement with the business grew, and it was kind of that quiet quitting. While some of them didn't necessarily quit, they kind of gave up and weren't interested, but also being kind of more open to, how exposing more of the inside workings of the business to the employees so that they can feel connected and part of that experience.
That's really good. I think keeping in mind that we're in the people business, especially as we have employees and we're working with others, just that constant communication is important to everybody. That way they feel valued and understand the mission and how they're a part of that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's definitely difficult to do on a ongoing basis, especially when you have many elements coming at you in different ways, but making time for that is super important, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And you said something there that really touches home for me too. We have so many different things that we're thinking about, especially as a founder or CEO that's running the whole business and the buck stops with you. But, taking that time, even when you don't have time, I think pays some pretty large dividends.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. So I've been with partner at Project Bionic for the last 2 years, and I had to fill in the CEO role while he had to take a leave. The founder CEO had to take a leave of absence, and just getting up to speed. I was so focused in that area, and that impacted, I think, some of the engagement from the employees because I wasn't able to dedicate that time there that it was needed.
Totally understand. And you mentioned Project Bionic, and I know you've done mergers in the past and are working on launching something new. So, what questions do you ask before you launch something new or get into one of these mergers or acquisitions?
I think one of the biggest questions is, I don't know that I would love to say that I ask detailed questions, and ask, the right questions. But for me, some of it is going by my gut. Does it feel right? Does it feel like where I want to go? And being an entrepreneur, I have a lot of, distractions. I don't know if I would say distractions, but maybe shiny objects that I tend to pursue. And I think those pursuits allow me to learn and inform that gut decision. So that allows me to do that. But I mean, overall, if I'm looking at, a merger or a partnership agreement, testing the waters is one of the big things. I think having some conversations. Yes, it might be a slower process, but making sure that it's right, because your investment in that partnership or new merger or acquisition is a distraction from something else that might be more beneficial down the road. So is asking myself, is it the right feeling for me? Is it the right area that I want to go? And is it in alignment? And, it's fine if it's not. It's just, you got to make sure that it's right for you, because ultimately you're going to have to put your passion, time, and energy into it.
That's really smart, and as I think about partnerships in particular from my business perspective, both on, our real estate business side of things, as well as buying other businesses and other things that we're working on, I really think about it like it's almost like a marriage, right? So, like, you have to know going in that you can tolerate this person for the next 5 plus 10 years, right? So you're really trying to, for lack of a better way of putting it, it's a lot of speed dating. It's like, okay, can we go to dinner and have fun? What do you do when things really suck? Because as an entrepreneur, a lot of times you have to make some really shitty decisions. They're not fun and nobody enjoys it. So how do these people interact? And I love what you're saying about testing the waters, because you don't really know until you're put in some of these situations. And the last thing any of us wants is a failed partnership or something like that that we have to try to, gracefully navigate and exit on. So, any thoughts or advice around how to test those waters and make sure it is a good fit as people get into that?
I think I had a mentor once tell me, a way to look at it from a partnership perspective is, could you have dinner with this person once a week for the next period of time? If the answer is no, then it's not a good partnership. If the answer is yes, then yeah, it's a indicator that yes, it could work well. It's just an indicator, but at least if you answer no, then you know that it's not going to work. And going to dinner, means that you're having a conversation with them. You're having engagement, and you're willing to have a personal connection with them, because business with a partner is not strictly business. There's personal sides to it and everything like that. And I can tell you that in this partnership with my partner in Project Bionic, he had to take a leave of absence for his personal health, and I had to be the individual that went between him and all kinds of different people, and I had to, understand his personal side and tried to navigate those waters that allowed, or that didn't expose too much of his personal stuff, because he wasn't personal with some of these people, and but still get the information out.
Yeah, and that's great. I think about it, I like the weekly dinner thing. I think about it because values are so important to me in our business. If I wouldn't go on vacation with you and have you around my kids, we're never doing business together. You know what I mean? So that's just the way I look at it, because I think this is really a long term life endeavor. And it's a small world. I don't know if you've experienced this, but like, it is a very small world out there, and people you meet today probably have connections with somebody who you're going to run into 5 or 10, 10 years down the road, who you may need that relationship with. And it's better off to know early if your values align and how this is going to work, even if the business goes sideways, what kind of person are you dealing with?
Yeah, I think your point about values is extremely powerful. That, if you don't have aligned values, it's not going to work well. And I was involved with another business that I was an investor in, and I grew to find out that, our political values weren't aligned. And ultimately, down the road, I started questioning a lot of things. We ended up in lawsuits and everything like that. You know, so it blew up fairly quickly.
Yeah. And I think it's good to know how people think, right? Because it does impact how you make decisions, or if you have things going on in your personal life, especially if you're an entrepreneur, that your personal life and your business life, they are closely attached. You don't get to have two different versions of yourself like you do as an employee, where you go home and shut off. It's still your business and it's still your problem at the end of the day.
Yep, exactly.
Well, one other question that I have for you around, agencies. You've been in business for a long time. So what do you think really separates agencies that are able to be in business long term versus those who kind of flame out really quickly? I know there's a much lower barrier to entry into the market right now. So what's separating these two groups out?
I think one of the big things that I find success with agencies is a desire to understand the business. So many companies come in or agencies come in and are like, okay, we have the solution for you. And at an agency, I think you need to understand the business and how it operates. And, that might be different you might work with a consumer packaged good business and you might work with another one, but they operate in two different ways and they have two different values and or value sets. So aligning those elements to make sure that is what works. So more at the I don't know what kind of emotional level, and operational level, so that you're actually caring about the business and the success versus just doing it to get a revenue in the door.
Yeah, absolutely. As you're talking there, it makes me think about working with some software companies in my prior life in corporate America, and they would have all the solutions before they even knew what the problem was.
Right.
So from the get-go that it's going to be, even if you do need their solution, it's going to be a difficult relationship because they're interested in it for themselves rather than seeing it as, we both need to benefit. I'm here to solve your problem. I'm going to get paid as a result, but they're looking at it from a very different lens. And I think as we continue to evolve and have more AI that's leaning in on sales and marketing and other stuff, I think that's what's going to separate the companies that stick around versus those who are either going to be acquired or go out of business.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. And as you mentioned, AI, so many people are leaning into that. And oh, we're an agency that is, using AI so we can create lower costs for you and everything. But it's great to promote your tool set, which I believe AI is a great tool in it. But if you're not able to think about how that solves a problem or guide your tools to do the right work for you, or guide the tools in a way that is allows you to solve the problem and not create new problems,
Right.
then I think that's what makes you a successful agency, not that you have the latest and greatest chat gpt or profile or whatever.
Yeah, I love that, because I do think AI is here to stay, but how we choose to use it is going to make a big difference and go forward. Because as we talk to more consumers, people still want to buy from people. They still want people's brains to help solve their problems so they don't get, I was talking to somebody yesterday or earlier in this week, and they were talking about an untrained chat GPT or an untrained GPT is really just like the lowest level information about humans on the planet, right?
Right.
So trying to figure out how do we interact with this and solve these problems. So you mentioned that you like AI. Is there anything in particular that you see going forward or something that you like working with that's really helped in your business?
From an AI perspective,
Yeah.
we've definitely integrated AI into our workflows, helping us draft copy, helping us draft ideas. We're even launching a new tool as part of our West Coast content launch. It's going to be called Thought Voice, which has a lot of AI tool on the back end. We've used it for coding, but the ideas still come from humans, because humans connect with other humans. They don't connect with other computers. And right now, AI doesn't have the ability to connect at an emotional level, at a deep emotional level, and continue that connection. There's definitely, it's advancing a little bit and getting there. So I'd say that there's definitely tools out there that we've seen and we've utilized, but we're not getting to where I feel we'll be replacing humans, because that element of human connection is there. And even at certain levels of maybe accounting or anything like that, we're still needing to understand how that how that works. yes, accounting is numbers, ones and zeros, but where's the business owners wanting to put that money, or how are they wanting to invest, or how are they wanting to see that? Still requires the input from the business owner and not necessarily an AI that can think for the business owner.
I couldn't have said that better, and I think a lot about that. I love AI. I think it's great. But as an accountant who uses AI, you have to know what questions to ask, right? So I asked it questions not that long ago when the 50-year mortgage was first starting to come out. I was really trying to do some analysis, and I have tools to do this outside of ChatGPT and other things. But I wanted to know, what's the difference in the interest amount that you're going to pay for a 50-year mortgage versus a traditional 30. And I got to looking at the math and I was like, that number's not right. I know that number's not right. Like, it just feels off, right? And that's where I think that experience and differentiation comes in. That if you don't have some of that background and you don't know things like, what numbers should look like or what questions to ask, you can really kind of go in the wrong direction. So,
It's kind of like dealing with an untrained therapist, right? So a
yeah,
therapist can guide you to becoming a better person or solving the challenge that you have, but an untrained person can certainly send you in the wrong direction and mess up the rest of your life.
yeah, absolutely. Well, our conversation has been great today. I really enjoyed it. So before we wrap up, I would love to know, what's one secret that you wish you would have known starting out as an entrepreneur?
One secret, the biggest secret I think is trust your gut. That is probably one of the bigger secrets. The other thing is, if I can do two,
Yeah.
put a value on your time. I had a great mentor that told me, if you're put a value on your time, an hourly rate, whatever it might be, you might not pay yourself that, but at least that's what you think you should be paid. And if you would pay that for the role that you're doing at that time, then that's great. But if you wouldn't pay that, then you shouldn't be doing it. So if you're taking out the garbage and you say that you're worth $200 an hour, would you pay somebody $200 an hour to take out the garbage? Not that it's, a lesser role, but, you know, just put a value on that time, and so that you recognize that you're giving value to your company.
I love that. That's some great advice and some real wisdom there. Because I think a lot of times entrepreneurs, they work themselves into the dirt doing tasks that don't really deliver the value that it should for the time that they invest.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. And before we wrap up, Kevin, if guests want to learn more about what you're working on or connect with you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah. So on LinkedIn, my profile is KMAUDE. My website, or you can reach me at Kevin@kevinmaude.com. We're launching a new company called West Coast Content. So you can reach me at Kevin@westcoastcontent.com. And yeah, so I'm in those probably three areas are the best ways to get a hold of me.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. And thank you so much to everybody for listening to C Suite Secrets. If you have found today's conversation as valuable as I have, be sure to hit that like and follow button and share with somebody else who's building a business. If you want more tips on how to grow your business between episodes, you can check us out on C Suite Insiders or on Instagram at Heather Parsons Official. Until next time, keep growing and remember, you don't have to do this alone.